There is a quiet accusation that lives in the background of modern life. If you are not producing, if you are not achieving, if you are not moving forward, then something must be wrong with you. You must be lazy. This belief is so deeply woven into culture that many people never question it. They simply absorb it. They grow up surrounded by messages that equate worth with output and value with productivity. Rest becomes suspicious. Stillness becomes uncomfortable. Slowing down begins to feel like failure. We live in a world where busyness is praised and exhaustion is worn like a badge of honor. People apologize for resting. They justify their breaks. They feel compelled to prove they have earned the right to stop. But beneath this pressure lies a misunderstanding. Because what looks like laziness from the outside is often exhaustion on the inside. The culture of constant productivity. Modern society rewards visible effort. Working late is admired. Being constantly available is expected. Pushing through fatigue is seen as strength. Over time, this creates a silent rule. If you stop, you fall behind. If you rest, you are weak. If you slow down, you are failing. This rule slowly reshapes the nervous system. Even during moments of rest, the body remains alert. The mind stays active. The sense of urgency never fully turns off. And when the nervous system is never allowed to complete its stress cycle, exhaustion accumulates. Not because you are lazy, but because you never truly recover. The conditioning. If you're not working, you're lazy. Many people learned early in life that rest must be justified. You rest after finishing tasks. You rest when you are sick. You rest only when everything is done. But life is never done. So rest becomes postponed, delayed, denied. Even when the body stops, the mind continues evaluating. I should be doing something. I'm wasting time. I'm falling behind. This internal pressure transforms rest into tension. And tension cannot restore energy. So the person remains tired, even while doing nothing. Why rest triggers guilt? For someone conditioned to equate worth with productivity, rest does not feel peaceful. It feels undeserved. When the body slows down, the mind speeds up. Thoughts begin to surface. I don't deserve to relax. Others are working harder. I'm being irresponsible. This guilt activates stress responses in the nervous system. Instead of entering recovery mode, the body remains in subtle alertness. The muscles do not fully release. Breathing stays shallow. The brain continues scanning for threats, including the threat of falling behind. So rest does not restore, and the exhaustion deepens. Laziness is not the absence of effort, it is the absence of energy. True laziness is rare. Most people are not avoiding life because they do not care. They are withdrawing because they are depleted. Energy is not only physical, it is emotional, it is cognitive, it is neurological. When these systems are overloaded for too long, the brain conserves resources. Motivation drops, focus weakens, initiation becomes difficult. From the outside, it looks like avoidance. From the inside, it feels like having no fuel left. You are not refusing to move. You are out of energy to move. Reframing the experience. What if the exhaustion you feel is not a character flaw, but a nervous system asking for repair? What if your lack of motivation is not proof of laziness, but evidence of overload? What if the guilt you feel while resting is conditioning, not truth? When we stop moralizing exhaustion, we can begin to understand it, and understanding is the first step toward recovery. Because laziness is not the absence of energy. It is the story we tell ourselves when we do not understand why the energy is gone. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep can fix. Your muscles ache, your body feels heavy. You rest, and slowly strength returns. Physical fatigue follows a clear rhythm: effort to rest to recovery. But burnout does not follow this rhythm. You can lie down for hours and still feel exhausted. You can sleep through the night and wake up depleted. You can take a day off and feel no renewal at all. This is often the moment confusion begins. I rested, so why am I still tired? Because psychological exhaustion is not stored in the muscles. It lives in the nervous system. When the body rests, but the brain remains tense. You may be physically still, yet internally active. The mind replays conversations. It anticipates future problems. It scans for potential threats. It processes unresolved emotions. Even in silence, the brain continues working. From the outside, you appear to be resting. From the inside, you are still engaged in survival mode. The nervous system does not measure rest by stillness of the body. It measures rest by the absence of perceived threat. If the brain senses pressure, uncertainty, or emotional strain, it remains alert, even while you lie in bed. This is why a person can be motionless and exhausted at the same time. Why sleep does not restore emotional exhaustion. Sleep restores physical systems. It repairs tissue, balances hormones, supports immune function, replenishes physical energy. But emotional exhaustion operates differently. If stress remains unresolved, the nervous system continues processing during sleep. Stress hormones may remain elevated. The brain may stay in a state of partial vigilance instead of deep restoration. Sleep becomes lighter. Recovery becomes incomplete. The nervous system never fully powers down. You may have slept long enough, but not deeply enough to recover. And in the morning, the fatigue remains. The feeling that the battery never recharges. People experiencing burnout often describe a specific sensation. I wake up already tired. No amount of rest helps. It feels like my battery never charges. This is not imagined. Chronic stress and emotional overload keep the nervous system in a prolonged state of activation. Over time, this disrupts energy regulation systems in the brain, including those responsible for motivation, focus, and vitality. Instead of cycling between effort and restoration, the system becomes stuck in low-power survival mode. Energy is conserved, initiative decreases, everything feels harder than it should. This is not weakness, it is neurological protection. Burnout depletes the nervous system. Burnout is not simply being tired. It is the cumulative depletion of emotional, cognitive, and physiological resources. When stress becomes chronic and recovery is insufficient, the nervous system shifts from adaptive stress response into protective shutdown. This may look like difficulty concentrating, emotional numbness, loss of motivation, increased irritability, persistent fatigue, feeling detached from life. The body is not refusing to function, it is attempting to survive prolonged overload. Understanding the difference. Physical fatigue asks for rest. Burnout asks for safety, emotional processing, and nervous system regulation. Physical fatigue improves with sleep. Burnout improves with restoration of psychological balance. Physical fatigue ends when muscles recover. Burnout ends when the nervous system feels safe enough to power down. If your body is resting, but your energy is not returning, nothing is wrong with you. Your nervous system is not broken. It is exhausted from protecting you for too long. And recovery begins not with more sleep, but with releasing the invisible tension you have been carrying inside. Some forms of exhaustion do not come from what you do, but from what your nervous system never stops preparing for. There is no visible emergency, no immediate danger, nothing clearly threatening your safety. And yet, inside the body, tension persists. A quiet vigilance, a constant scanning, an inability to fully relax. This is what chronic stress feels like. Not a dramatic crisis, but a nervous system that never receives the signal that it is safe to stand down. Constant anxiety in the background of daily life. Many people live with a low, continuous level of anxiety that becomes so familiar it fades into the background. It may appear as persistent worry about the future, anticipating worst-case scenarios, difficulty relaxing without distraction, a subtle sense that something is not okay, feeling mentally busy even in silence. This state does not feel like panic. It feels like tension that never fully leaves. Over time, the nervous system adapts to this baseline level of stress and begins to treat it as normal. But normal does not mean healthy. When the stress response remains active for too long, the body stops returning to true rest. Living in survival mode. The human nervous system is designed to protect you. When a threat appears, the brain activates survival responses. Fight, flight, freeze, hypervigilance. Heart rate increases, muscles prepare for action, attention narrows to potential danger. This response is life-saving in real emergencies, but modern stressors are rarely resolved in a single moment. Deadlines continue, financial concerns persist, social pressures accumulate. Uncertainty about the future lingers. The threat does not pass. So the nervous system never completes the stress cycle. Instead of returning to calm, it remains partially activated, living in a prolonged state of readiness. This is survival mode without a finish line. Cortisol and the physiology of nervous exhaustion. When the brain perceives threat, it signals the release of stress hormones, including cortisol. In short bursts, cortisol is helpful. It mobilizes energy, sharpens attention, supports quick response. But when stress becomes chronic, cortisol remains elevated for long periods. Over time, this disrupts the body's natural balance. Sleep becomes lighter, energy regulation becomes unstable, immune function weakens, concentration declines, emotional regulation becomes more difficult. Eventually, the system that once mobilized energy begins to deplete it. The body cannot remain in emergency mode indefinitely. Nervous system fatigue begins to replace activation. You feel wired and tired at the same time, restless yet drained. When the brain cannot exit threat mode, the nervous system does not distinguish well between physical danger and psychological pressure. Uncertainty can feel like threat. Rejection can feel like threat. Loss of control can feel like threat. Emotional conflict can feel like threat. If the brain continues to interpret the environment as unsafe, it keeps protective systems online. Even when you are home, even when you are resting, even when nothing is happening. Safety is not determined by logic. It is determined by nervous system perception. And if safety is not felt, the body does not power down. The hidden cost of constant alertness. Living in prolonged hypervigilance drains enormous amounts of energy. Attention remains partially locked on monitoring the environment. Muscles retain subtle tension. The brain continues predictive processing. The body stays prepared for action that never comes. This continuous readiness is exhausting, not dramatically, but relentlessly. Over time, this invisible expenditure of energy leads to mental fatigue, emotional depletion, difficulty focusing, loss of motivation, a persistent sense of overwhelm. You are not tired because you are weak. You are tired because your nervous system has been protecting you without pause. Recovery begins with safety. Burnout and nervous exhaustion are not signs that something inside you is broken. They are signals that your system has been operating in protection mode for too long. The nervous system restores energy when it perceives safety, not when problems disappear, not when life becomes perfect, but when the body experiences moments of genuine regulation. Moments where nothing is demanded, nothing is expected, nothing is threatening your belonging or survival. Only then can the nervous system begin to release its grip on vigilance. Only then can energy return. Because the brain cannot heal while it believes it must remain on guard, there is a form of work that no one sees. No movement, no visible effort, no measurable output. And yet, the mind is constantly active. Thoughts continue looping. Memories replay themselves. Possible futures are rehearsed. Decisions are weighed and reweighed. From the outside, it looks like you are resting. Inside, your brain is still working. The endless stream of thoughts. The human mind is designed to think, anticipate, and interpret the world. But in periods of overload, thinking shifts from helpful processing into continuous mental noise. Instead of clarity, there is repetition. Instead of resolution, there is looping. You revisit conversations. You replay what you said. You imagine what you should have said. You rehearse future interactions. The brain is searching for certainty, closure, and safety. But when resolution does not come, the loop continues. This quiet mental activity consumes enormous cognitive energy, even when you are physically still. The mind replaying the past. Unresolved experiences often remain active in the nervous system. Moments of embarrassment, conversations that felt incomplete, situations where you felt misunderstood, decisions you wish you could revisit. The brain returns to these moments not to punish you, but to understand them, to extract meaning, prevent future pain, and restore a sense of control. But when reflection turns into rumination, energy is drained rather than restored. The past is relived instead of integrated, and the nervous system remains activated by events that are no longer happening. Anxiety and future scenarios. At the same time, the mind is scanning forward. It anticipates problems before they arise. It imagines worst-case outcomes. It rehearses conversations that may never happen. It prepares for threats that may never appear. This predictive function evolved to protect us. But in an environment filled with uncertainty, the future becomes an endless field of potential dangers. The brain attempts to prepare for everything, and preparation without resolution becomes exhaustion. Decision fatigue, the invisible drain. Every decision requires mental energy. What to prioritize, how to respond, what to say, what to delay, what to change, what to tolerate. Modern life demands hundreds of micro-decisions each day, many of them without clear answers. When decisions accumulate without pauses for mental recovery, the brain begins to conserve energy. Focus weakens, motivation declines. Simple choices feel overwhelming. This is not incompetence, it is cognitive overload. The brain works even when the body is still lying on the couch does not guarantee rest. Scrolling through information, processing emotional conversations, mentally planning tomorrow, comparing yourself to others, evaluating unfinished tasks. These activities keep the brain in active processing mode. True cognitive rest requires moments when the brain is not solving, predicting, evaluating, or replaying. Moments of mental stillness. Moments where nothing needs to be figured out. Without these pauses, mental load accumulates and exhaustion deepens. Why mental overload feels like physical fatigue? The brain consumes a significant portion of the body's energy resources. Continuous cognitive processing increases metabolic demand and maintains subtle physiological tension throughout the body. Shoulders remain slightly raised, jaw muscles stay tight, breathing becomes shallow, the nervous system remains activated. Over time, mental overload manifests as physical fatigue. You feel heavy, slowed down, drained without clear cause. Your body is tired because your mind has not stopped working. Rest begins where thinking pauses. You do not need to stop thinking forever, but recovery requires moments where the mind is not searching for answers, moments where the past is allowed to remain in the past, moments where the future is not rehearsed, moments where nothing needs to be solved right now. When the brain is given permission to pause, the nervous system begins to settle. And in that stillness, energy slowly returns. Because the deepest form of rest is not physical stillness, it is the quieting of the mind that has been working without rest. Not all exhaustion comes from what you do. Some of it comes from what you do not allow yourself to feel. From the effort of staying composed, from holding back reactions, from swallowing words that never leave your mouth, from carrying emotions that never find release. On the surface, you appear calm. Inside, pressure accumulates. And over time, this pressure becomes exhaustion. The hidden cost of suppressed anger. Anger is often misunderstood. Many people were taught that anger is dangerous, inappropriate, or unacceptable. They learn to silence it, override it, or bury it beneath politeness and self-control. So, instead of expressing anger, they internalize it. They say, "It's fine," when it is not. They smile when something hurts. They tolerate what feels unfair. They minimize their own boundaries. But anger does not disappear when it is ignored. It remains active in the nervous system. Because anger is not simply an emotion, it is energy, mobilized for protection. When that protective energy is blocked from expression, it has nowhere to go. The body holds it. The muscles store it. The nervous system sustains the activation. This quiet internal tension consumes energy continuously. Unprocessed hurt and emotional residue. Not every wound is visible. Unspoken disappointments, moments of betrayal, feeling unseen or unappreciated, words that linger long after they were spoken. When these experiences are not processed, the nervous system continues to carry them. Part of you remains in the moment that hurt you. Part of you continues searching for closure. This does not happen consciously, but emotionally, the experience remains unfinished. and unfinished emotional experiences require energy to contain. Over time, this emotional residue contributes to fatigue, heaviness, and emotional numbness. Not because you are weak, but because you have been carrying more than you realized. The exhaustion of holding it together. Many people learn to survive by being strong. They become reliable, composed, resilient. The one who does not fall apart. They hold space for others. They remain calm in crisis. They keep moving forward no matter what they feel. This strength is admirable, but it often comes with an invisible cost, because staying strong frequently means suppressing vulnerability, postponing grief, and overriding emotional needs. The nervous system stays in containment mode. Tears are postponed. Pain is postponed. Emotional release is postponed. And what is postponed does not disappear. It accumulates. Why suppressing emotions drains energy? Emotions are physiological processes, not just psychological experiences. When an emotion arises, the nervous system activates specific responses in the body. Heart rate changes, muscles prepare for action, hormones shift, breathing patterns adjust. If the emotion is felt and processed, the cycle completes and the body returns to baseline. But when emotions are suppressed, the activation remains incomplete. The nervous system stays partially engaged. The body holds residual tension. The brain continues monitoring the unresolved state. This ongoing containment requires energy. Not dramatic energy, but constant expenditure. And over time, this quiet drain becomes exhaustion. Emotional numbness, when the system shuts down. If emotions remain suppressed for long enough, the nervous system may shift into protective dampening. Feelings become muted. Reactions feel distant. Joy becomes less accessible. Connection feels harder to experience. This is not coldness, it is protection. When emotional load exceeds capacity, the nervous system reduces sensitivity to prevent overwhelm. But numbness also reduces vitality. When you stop feeling pain, you often stop feeling aliveness. Emotional release is not weakness, it is regulation. Emotions are designed to move through the body, not remain trapped inside it. Anger protects boundaries. Grief honors loss. Hurt signals unmet needs. Tears release accumulated tension. Allowing emotions to be acknowledged and processed does not create chaos. It completes the nervous system cycle. It frees energy that was locked in containment. It allows the body to return to equilibrium. If you feel exhausted without understanding why, consider what you have been holding inside. The strength it takes to suppress emotions is the same strength that drains your energy. And sometimes, recovery begins not with doing more, but with allowing yourself to feel what you have been carrying alone. Some people become strong not by choice, but by necessity. They learn early to handle problems quietly, to endure discomfort without complaint, to carry more than their share, to be the reliable one when others cannot cope. Over time, strength becomes identity. You are the one who manages, the one who fixes, the one who does not fall apart, the one others depend on. And slowly, without noticing, you begin carrying the weight of many lives, not just your own. The habit of carrying everything alone. Responsibility can become a reflex. You anticipate problems before they arise. You step in before being asked. You prevent conflict. You absorb tension so others feel comfortable. This pattern often develops from love, loyalty, or survival. Perhaps you learned that stability depended on you. Perhaps you became the emotional anchor in your family. Perhaps reliability became your way of belonging. Over time, helping stops being a choice. It becomes a role. And roles are hard to put down. When strength becomes self-abandonment. From the outside, you appear capable and composed. Inside, you may feel overextended, unseen in your own needs, unable to rest without guilt, afraid that everything will collapse if you stop. You continue giving even when you are depleted. You continue supporting even when you need support. You continue holding everything together while quietly falling apart inside. This is not weakness. It is what happens when strength has no boundaries. The fear of asking for help. For many strong individuals, asking for help feels deeply uncomfortable. It may feel like burdening others, losing control, appearing incompetent, risking rejection, breaking the image of being dependable. Some learned early that help was unavailable. Others learned that vulnerability was unsafe. So self-reliance became protection. If I handle everything myself, I will not be disappointed. If I need nothing, I cannot be let down. But independence taken to extremes becomes isolation, and isolation multiplies emotional load. Hyper-responsibility, when everything feels like your duty. Hyper-responsibility is the internal belief that you are responsible not only for your own life, but for the stability, emotions, and outcomes of others. You feel responsible for keeping peace in relationships, preventing conflict, managing others' feelings, ensuring everything runs smoothly, anticipating problems before they happen. Even when no one asks you to carry this burden, the nervous system experiences it as obligation. The brain remains alert, attention remains divided, relaxation feels unsafe. Because if you relax, something might fall apart. This constant vigilance drains energy over time. The nervous system cost of being the strong one. Strength without restoration leads to depletion. When you are always the one holding space, your nervous system rarely exits responsibility mode. You remain partially alert even during rest. Your mind scans for what still needs attention. Your body resists full relaxation. The nervous system never receives the signal, "You are allowed to set this down." Over time, exhaustion is not caused by tasks themselves, but by the psychological weight of constant responsibility. Carrying is heavy, even when you carry it well. Why letting go feels unsafe? For someone accustomed to being strong, letting go can feel dangerous. If you stop managing, will things fall apart? If you stop helping, will people leave? If you show vulnerability, will trust disappear? These fears are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a nervous system that learns stability through control and reliability. But control is not the same as safety, and strength is not the same as sustainability. Strength requires restoration. True strength is not the ability to carry everything indefinitely. It is the wisdom to recognize limits. It is the courage to share weight. It is the permission to rest without collapse. It is the understanding that support is not failure. Even the strongest nervous systems require recovery. Even the most capable people need space to stop holding everything together. Because strength without restoration does not create resilience, it creates exhaustion. If you have always been the strong one, you may have forgotten what it feels like to set the weight down. But you were never meant to carry the world alone. And sometimes the bravest act of strength is allowing yourself to be supported. Never before has the human brain been exposed to so much information in a single day. Notifications arrive without pause. Headlines demand attention. Messages appear faster than they can be answered. Screens glow from morning until night. Even in silence, the possibility of interruption remains. The nervous system never fully relaxes because it expects the next alert. This is not simply distraction, it is continuous cognitive stimulation without recovery. The stress of constant notifications. Each notification, no matter how small, triggers an orienting response in the brain. A sound, a vibration, a flashing icon. Attention shifts immediately. The nervous system asks, is this important? Is this urgent? Do I need to respond? Even if the message is trivial, the brain has already activated. Heart rate subtly changes. Focus is interrupted. Mental processing is redirected. When this happens dozens or hundreds of times per day, the nervous system never settles into sustained calm. Instead, it becomes conditioned to expect interruption. Silence begins to feel temporary. News overload and the nervous system. The human brain evolved to respond strongly to potential threats. Modern news cycles deliver a continuous stream of alarming information. Crises, conflicts, economic instability, disasters, uncertainty about the future. Even when events are geographically distant, the nervous system reacts as if danger is nearby. This phenomenon, sometimes called vicarious stress, keeps the brain in a subtle state of alertness. You are not in danger, but your nervous system is absorbing signals of threat. Repeated exposure without time for emotional processing creates chronic stress activation. The inability to switch off the mind. Digital environments are designed to capture attention. Infinite scrolling, endless recommendations, continuous updates. There is no natural stopping point. The brain does not receive closure. Instead, it remains in anticipatory mode. What's next? What did I miss? Is there something new? This anticipation loop prevents mental completion, and without completion, the nervous system does not power down. Even after you put the phone away, mental stimulation continues to echo. Attention, fragmentation, and cognitive fatigue. Attention is not limitless. Each time focus shifts, the brain expends energy reorienting itself. Frequent switching between tasks, messages, and media fragments attention and increases cognitive load. Deep focus becomes harder. Mental clarity decreases. Simple tasks require more effort. Over time, the brain becomes accustomed to short bursts of attention rather than sustained engagement. This fragmentation is exhausting. Not because you are doing more, but because your attention never settles. Why the brain cannot recover. Recovery requires periods of reduced stimulation, moments without input, moments without decision-making, moments without new information to process. But digital environments fill nearly every pause. Waiting in line becomes scrolling. Silence becomes checking updates. Moments of boredom disappear. Without pauses, the brain cannot reset. And when attention never resets, fatigue accumulates. The nervous system in continuous partial alertness. When notifications, information streams, and digital demands remain constant, the nervous system adapts to a state of continuous partial alertness. Not full stress, not full calm, but a constant readiness to re-engage. This state drains energy quietly and persistently. You may feel mentally scattered, easily overstimulated, unable to concentrate deeply, restless during stillness, exhausted without clear cause. Your brain is not tired from thinking too little, it is tired from never stopping. Restoring attention in an overstimulated world. The nervous system restores itself in moments of cognitive spaciousness, moments where nothing new enters awareness, moments where attention can soften rather than sharpen, moments where the brain is not required to react. These pauses are not empty, they are restorative, because attention, like muscles, requires recovery after exertion, and without recovery, exhaustion is inevitable. In a world that never stops speaking, silence becomes medicine. In a world that constantly demands attention, stillness becomes restoration. And sometimes, the most powerful way to regain energy is not to do more, but to allow your attention to rest. There is a form of exhaustion that does not come from effort, but from emptiness. You continue moving through your days. You complete tasks. You meet obligations. You respond, perform, function. From the outside, life appears intact. Inside, something feels absent. Not dramatic pain, not acute distress, but a quiet absence of aliveness. This is the fatigue of living without meaning. Life on autopilot. When routines repeat without reflection, life can slowly shift into automatic mode. Wake up, work, respond, consume information, sleep, repeat. Days pass efficiently but without presence. You function, but you are not fully there. You act, but you do not feel engaged. You continue, but without a sense of direction. Autopilot protects energy in the short term, but over time, disconnection replaces vitality. Because the human nervous system is not designed only to survive, it is designed to experience. The absence of inspiration. Inspiration is not constant excitement. It is the quiet sense that what you do matters, that your actions connect to something meaningful, that your effort has purpose beyond survival. When inspiration fades, everything begins to feel heavier. Tasks require more effort. Motivation becomes forced. Initiation feels difficult. You are not lazy. You are disconnected from emotional engagement. Without emotional engagement, the brain reduces motivational signaling. Dopamine systems that support curiosity and drive become less active. Action begins to feel mechanical, and mechanical living drains energy. Working without inner resonance. Many people spend large portions of their lives performing roles that no longer reflect who they are becoming. They meet expectations. They fulfill responsibilities. They continue along paths chosen long ago. But inside, a quiet dissonance grows. The work is done, but it does not feel meaningful. The effort is real, but it does not feel aligned. This misalignment requires psychological compensation. You must push yourself to continue. Convince yourself it is fine. Suppress the inner voice asking for change. This internal friction consumes enormous energy, not because the work is hard, but because it is disconnected from purpose. Why meaning fuels energy. Energy is not only a biological resource, it is also psychological. When actions feel meaningful, the nervous system experiences engagement rather than depletion. Effort feels purposeful. Challenges feel worthwhile. Fatigue feels satisfying rather than empty. Meaning transforms effort into vitality. Without meaning, even small tasks can feel draining. Because the brain is not wired merely to complete tasks, it is wired to pursue significance. Emotional emptiness as protective shutdown. When meaning remains absent for extended periods, the nervous system may shift into emotional dampening. Feelings flatten. Excitement becomes rare. Joy feels distant. Connection feels muted. This is not a personal failure, it is a protective response. When the system cannot find fulfillment, it reduces emotional intensity to conserve energy and prevent chronic disappointment. But emotional dampening also reduces vitality. You stop feeling the highs, but you also lose access to aliveness. When energy disappears. Many people believe they have lost motivation, but often they have lost connection. Connection to purpose. Connection to personal meaning, connection to what feels alive inside. Energy flows where meaning exists. When meaning fades, energy withdraws, not as punishment, but as guidance, a signal that something essential is missing. Reconnecting with meaning. Meaning does not always require dramatic life changes. Sometimes it begins with small acts of presence, moments of authenticity, creative expression, helping someone in a way that feels real, choosing what aligns instead of what is expected. Meaning is not found by force, it is rediscovered through connection. Connection to values, to authenticity, to moments that feel true. If you feel emotionally empty, it does not mean you are broken. It may mean you have been living without resonance for too long. Because the human spirit can endure effort, stress, and challenge, but it struggles to sustain energy in the absence of meaning. And sometimes, exhaustion is not asking you to push harder, but to rediscover what makes you feel alive. There is a moment many people know well. You lie down. You stop working. You give yourself permission to rest. But relief does not come. Your body is still. Your mind is not. Your fatigue remains. And confusion arises. I rested, so why am I still exhausted? Because stopping activity is not the same as restoration. Lying down is not the same as recovering. Physical stillness does not automatically signal safety to the nervous system. You can lie on the couch while mentally replaying conversations. You can scroll endlessly while absorbing stressful information. You can sit in silence while worrying about tomorrow. From the outside, you are resting. Inside, activation continues. True restoration requires a shift in nervous system state, not just a change in posture. The body may be still, but if the brain remains alert, recovery cannot begin. Rest requires safety, not just stillness. The nervous system restores energy when it perceives safety. This perception is not logical, it is physiological. If the brain senses unresolved pressure, emotional tension, or potential threat, the body remains in guarded mode. Muscles retain subtle tension, breathing stays shallow, stress hormones remain active, attention remains partially vigilant. Even in a quiet room, the nervous system may remain prepared. Because safety is not defined by environment alone, it is defined by internal state. Why anxiety blocks restoration? When the nervous system is activated by anxiety, the body prioritizes readiness over recovery. Energy is reserved for action. Attention scans for problems. The brain continues predictive processing. In this state, deep relaxation feels uncomfortable. Stillness may even increase anxiety because distraction disappears and internal tension becomes more noticeable. So the person reaches for stimulation, scrolling, background noise, multitasking, not because they want activity, but because silence feels unsafe. Without resolving internal activation, rest remains superficial, and exhaustion persists. The nervous system must exit alert mode. Restoration begins when the nervous system transitions from survival activation into regulation. This shift involves muscles softening, breath deepening, heart rate slowing, mental urgency decreasing, attention widening rather than narrowing. This state cannot be forced through willpower. It emerges when the body senses it no longer needs to defend, anticipate, or brace. Only then can recovery processes fully activate. Why doing nothing can still be exhausting? Many people attempt to rest while continuing mental engagement, thinking about unfinished tasks, judging themselves for resting, checking messages repeatedly, consuming stimulating content, planning tomorrow's responsibilities. This keeps cognitive and emotional systems active. The brain does not interpret this as rest, it interprets it as low-intensity engagement, and low-intensity engagement still consumes energy. Restoration happens in inner quiet. Recovery is not the absence of movement, it is the absence of internal urgency. Moments when nothing needs to be solved. Moments when the future is not being rehearsed. Moments when the body is not bracing for impact. In these moments, the nervous system shifts from protection to repair. Energy regulation stabilizes, stress hormones decrease, mental clarity begins to return, rest becomes restorative. When rest begins to work. Rest starts to restore you when you feel safe enough to soften, your breathing slows naturally, your thoughts lose urgency, your body releases subtle tension. You stop monitoring what still needs to be done. This is not laziness, it is recovery. And recovery is a biological process, not a reward for productivity. If rest has not been helping you, it does not mean you are resting wrong. It may mean your nervous system has not yet felt safe enough to let go. Because rest works only when the body is no longer bracing, the mind is no longer guarding, and the nervous system finally understands, for this moment, you are safe. When exhaustion becomes chronic, people often turn against themselves. They begin to believe they have lost discipline, that they have become unmotivated, that something is wrong with their character. I used to be productive. Why can't I do simple things now? Why does everything feel so hard? But what appears to be laziness is often the nervous system signaling overload, not weakness, not failure, but depletion. No energy for even simple tasks. One of the most confusing signs of overload is the inability to complete small, ordinary tasks. Replying to a message feels overwhelming. Washing dishes feels disproportionately heavy. Starting a simple task feels impossible. This is not because the task is difficult. It is because initiation requires mental energy, and energy reserves are depleted. When the nervous system is exhausted, the brain conserves resources. It reduces non-essential effort in order to protect basic functioning. From the outside, this looks like avoidance. From the inside, it feels like having no fuel. Procrastination as a symptom of exhaustion. Procrastination is often misunderstood as poor self-control. But in states of overload, Procrastination can be protective. When the brain perceives a task as requiring more energy than is available, it delays engagement. This is not laziness. It is energy management. You may notice yourself avoiding tasks you care about, scrolling instead of starting, feeling paralyzed before beginning, waiting for the right moment that never comes. The nervous system is not refusing action. It is signaling depletion. Irritability and emotional reactivity. When cognitive and emotional resources are depleted, tolerance for stimulation decreases. Small inconveniences feel overwhelming. Noise becomes irritating. Minor frustrations trigger disproportionate reactions. This happens because the nervous system has less capacity to regulate incoming stimuli. Emotional regulation requires energy. When energy is low, reactivity rises. This is not a personality flaw. It is nervous system fatigue, apathy, and emotional numbness. Overload can lead not only to irritability, but also to emotional flattening. Motivation disappears. Interest fades. Things that once mattered feel distant. This apathy is not indifference. It is protective shutdown. When the nervous system is overwhelmed for too long, it dampens emotional intensity to prevent further overload. But this dampening also reduces enthusiasm and drive. You do not stop caring. You lose access to the energy required to engage. The urge to withdraw and isolate. When overstimulation and emotional demands exceed capacity, isolation can feel like relief. You may find yourself avoiding social interaction, ignoring messages, cancelling plans, wanting silence and solitude. This is not rejection of others. It is the nervous system seeking reduced input. Connection requires emotional processing. Conversation requires cognitive engagement. Social interaction requires regulatory capacity. When these resources are depleted, withdrawal becomes a form of self-protection, understanding the signal. Taken together, these experiences can feel alarming. Low energy, avoidance, irritability, apathy, withdrawal. But these are not signs of weakness. They are signals of overload. Signals that the nervous system has been operating beyond its capacity for too long. Signals that recovery is needed. Reframing the experience. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not failing at life. You are exhausted in ways that are not visible from the outside. When the nervous system is overloaded, it reduces output to preserve survival. This is not dysfunction, it is protection. If you recognize these signs in yourself, consider the possibility that your system is not resisting life, it is asking for relief. Because exhaustion is not a character flaw, it is a message. And when that message is understood, recovery can begin. When energy disappears and motivation fades, many people reach a painful conclusion. I must be lazy. This judgment can feel convincing, especially in a culture that equates productivity with worth. But laziness and burnout are not the same experience, and confusing them can deepen shame instead of guiding recovery. Understanding the difference is not about labeling yourself. It is about self-understanding. Laziness. Energy exists, desire does not. Laziness is not the absence of capacity. It is the absence of willingness. You have the energy to act, but you choose not to engage. You may prefer comfort. You may prioritize pleasure. You may simply not care about the task. There is no internal struggle, no frustration about inaction, no distress about not moving forward. The nervous system is not depleted. It is unmotivated. Laziness feels like, I could do it, I just don't want to. Burnout. Desire exists, energy does not. Burnout creates a very different internal experience. You want to act. You care about the outcome. You feel the importance of the task. But when you try to begin, something inside resists. Not psychologically, physiologically. Your body feels heavy. Your mind struggles to focus. Initiation feels overwhelming. Burnout feels like, I want to do it, but I can't. This gap between intention and capacity often creates shame, frustration, and self-criticism. But the problem is not motivation, it is depletion. The emotional experience, indifference versus frustration. One of the clearest differences lies in emotional response. Laziness rarely produces distress. Burnout often produces guilt and anxiety. A person who is simply unmotivated does not lie awake worrying about unfinished tasks. A burned-out person often does. They care deeply, but lack the energy required to act. This mismatch creates inner tension. What happens in the nervous system? In laziness, the nervous system is regulated and resourced. In burnout, the nervous system is overloaded or depleted. Chronic stress, emotional exhaustion, and cognitive overload reduce the brain's capacity to initiate effort. Motivation systems become disrupted, and energy conservation mechanisms activate. The brain is not refusing to act, it is protecting remaining resources. Signs you may be experiencing burnout instead of laziness. You want to be productive but feel paralyzed. You feel guilty for resting. Small tasks feel overwhelming. You feel tired even after sleeping. You feel emotionally drained rather than indifferent. You remember having energy before the exhaustion began. These are not signs of unwillingness, they are signs of depletion. Why mislabeling yourself is harmful. When burnout is mistaken for laziness, people often respond with self-criticism. They push harder, they shame themselves, they remove rest, they increase pressure. This intensifies nervous system overload and deepens exhaustion. Recovery requires compassion, not punishment, understanding, not judgment. The key to self-understanding. The distinction is simple but powerful. Laziness equals energy is available but desire is absent. Burnout equals desire is present but energy is depleted. One is a matter of preference, the other is a matter of capacity. One requires motivation, the other requires restoration. If you feel the desire to move forward but cannot access the energy to begin, you are not lazy, you are depleted. And recognizing the difference is the first step toward treating yourself with the understanding you truly need. When exhaustion becomes chronic, many people respond with more pressure. They tighten discipline. They push harder. They demand productivity from an already depleted system. But overload cannot be solved with force. Burnout is not healed through stricter control. It is healed through restoration. Recovery begins not with doing more, but with changing how you relate to yourself. Reduce overload instead of increasing discipline. When energy is low, the instinct to try harder often backfires. Pushing through depletion signals to the nervous system that pressure continues. Stress activation remains high. Recovery is postponed. Instead of asking, "How can I push myself to do more?" begin asking, "What is draining me that I can reduce?" This may include lowering unrealistic expectations, reducing unnecessary commitments, creating pauses between tasks, limiting exposure to stress triggers, allowing tasks to be good enough rather than perfect. Recovery requires creating space where the nervous system can exit survival mode. Less pressure is not failure, it is repair. Allow yourself to rest without guilt. Rest does not restore when it is accompanied by self-criticism. If your mind repeats, "I should be doing something," "I don't deserve this," "I'm falling behind," the nervous system remains activated. Guilt transforms rest into tension. True rest begins when permission replaces justification. Rest is not a reward for productivity, it is a biological requirement. When rest is allowed without defense, the body begins to soften, breathing deepens, and recovery processes activate. Emotional release and nervous system relief. Suppressed emotions require energy to contain. Recovery includes allowing safe emotional expression. This does not require dramatic catharsis. It may look like speaking honestly with someone you trust, writing what you have been holding inside, allowing yourself to cry, acknowledging anger without judgment, naming emotions instead of suppressing them. Emotions that are felt can complete their cycle. Emotions that are contained continue consuming energy. Release creates relief. Restore the nervous system through regulation. The nervous system recovers through experiences of safety and regulation. Small, consistent signals of safety are more effective than dramatic interventions. Helpful practices may include slow, steady breathing that lengthens the exhale, spending time in quiet environments, gentle movement such as walking or stretching, reducing sensory overload, moments of stillness without digital input, contact with nature or natural light. These experiences signal to the body that it is safe to power down. Recovery is not a single moment. It is a gradual return to regulation. Move from self-pressure to self-support. Burnout often deepens when inner dialogue remains harsh. Notice the difference between "I should be stronger" and "I am recovering." "I'm failing" and "My system is overloaded." "I need to push harder" and "I need restoration." The nervous system responds to perceived threat, even when that threat comes from self-criticism. Self-support reduces internal threat signals and supports recovery. Recovery is a gentle process. Healing from overload is not immediate. Energy returns gradually. Clarity returns slowly. Motivation re-emerges in small moments. This is not regression. It is repair. Just as exhaustion accumulated over time, restoration unfolds over time. Patience is not passive, it is protective. Restoration begins with kindness toward yourself. You are not a machine that needs recalibration. You are a nervous system that has been under pressure for too long. Recovery begins when you stop fighting your exhaustion and start listening to it. When you replace pressure with gentleness. When you replace guilt with permission. When you replace self-criticism with understanding. Because healing does not begin with force, it begins with care. and from that care, energy slowly returns.